If your dog explodes at other dogs, lunges, barks, screams, pulls on the lead and scans the environment like they're looking for a fight, then I need you to hear this. Because your dog might not be just scared, they might be getting something out of the reaction. And that is why so many owners get stuck. They try treats, they try shouting, they try avoiding dogs, they try saying leave it, they try pulling the dog away, and they even try correcting the dog once they already lost its mind. And nothing changes, or worse, the dog gets better for a few days and then suddenly blows up again even harder. And the reason is simple. Most people are trying to fix reactivity at the exact moment the dog is already reacting. And that is too late. That is like trying to teach someone to swim while they are already drowning. What am I saying? Here's the breakdown. Tune in. Today I'm going to walk you through the actual step-by-step process for taking a reactive dog from chaos to calm. Not just throw food at the dog and hope for the best. Not just correct the dog until he shuts up. A real process. In this video, we're going to cover why your dog reacts, what they are getting out of it, why walking around the block could be making it worse, the mistake 99% of owners make with corrections, the foundation exercise you need before you go near another dog, what to do when your dog does explode, how to move from distance to neutrality, and make sure you watch this until the end, because near the end I'm going to explain something most owners don't want to hear. Some reactive dogs can be massively improved, but not every reactive dog can be treated like a normal social dog. And if you ignore that, you'll end up putting your dog, yourself, and other dogs in bad situations. So let's get into it. The first thing we need to figure out is simple. What actually triggers your dog? Is it dogs? Is it people? Is it children? Is it bikes? Is it cars? Is it men? Is it dogs behind fences? Is it dogs coming head on? Is it dogs too close? Is it dogs moving quickly? Because saying my dog is reactive is just a bit too vague. That doesn't tell us enough. A dog that reacts to every dog at 100 feet away is not the same as a dog that only reacts when another dog gets within a few feet. A dog that reacts because it's nervous is not the same as a dog that reacts because it enjoys the conflict. A dog that barks because it wants space is not the same as a dog that wants to get to the other dog. So before you start throwing solutions at the problem, you need to diagnose what the problem actually is. And here's where most owners go wrong. They keep putting the dog in the front of the trigger before the dog has the tools to deal with it. They walk past the same route. They pass the same houses. They go past the same barking dogs. They go to the same park. They stand there hoping today will be different. But every time the dog explodes, that behavior gets stronger. Because reactivity is not just something your dog does, it's something your dog rehearses, and what gets rehearsed gets repeated. The second question is even more important. What is reinforcing the behavior? Because dogs don't keep doing behaviors for no reason. There is always a payoff. Sometimes that payoff comes from the environment. For example, your dog sees another dog coming towards them. They feel uncomfortable, they bark, lunge and kick off. And the other dog moves away. In your dog's mind, that worked. So they felt the pressure, they reacted, and that pressure went away. So the behavior gets stronger. That is one of the reasons nervous dogs become reactive. They learn that acting crazy creates space. But there's another type of reinforcement people really underestimate, and that is internal reinforcement. This is when the dog gets a charge out of the reaction itself. And you see this a lot in working breeds, protection breeds, hard drive dogs, and dogs that are underfulfilled. Breeds such as German Shepherds, Malinois, Dobermans, Rottweilers, Bulldogs, Terriers, and working line dogs. These dogs can start reacting because they are unsure. But over time, the reaction itself becomes exciting. It becomes a hobby. It's a way they release pent-up energy. They start scanning for it. They start looking for the trigger. They lock on before anything else has happened. They almost look addicted to the explosion. And that is exactly why this becomes so hard to fix. Because if the dog gets an internal buzz from reacting, then every time they react, they pay themselves. Even if you don't reward them, even if you tell them off, even if the other dog doesn't come closer, the reaction itself can still be reinforcing. That is why you cannot allow constant rehearsal, because every explosion is another deposit into the wrong bank account. So once we know the trigger and we know what the dog is getting out of it, the next step is management. And I know management sounds boring, but this is where the whole thing starts. Because before you can teach the dog a better behaviour, you have to stop them practicing the old one. That might mean changing your walking route. It might mean walking at quieter times. It might mean driving somewhere quieter instead of walking straight out of your front door. It might mean not going to the busy park for a while. It might mean stopping those daily neighbourhood walks that keep putting your dog in situations they cannot handle. And I know some people hate it, but walking your reactive dog around the same trigger-filled environment every day is not fulfillment. For some dogs, it's just daily rehearsed stress. And for other dogs, it's daily rehearsed conflict. There's a massive difference between exercise and fulfillment. If you have a high drive dog and the only thing they get is a stressful walk around the block, don't be surprised when they turn that walk into their job. And their job becomes scanning, blocking on and reacting. So before we start fixing the dog, we need to stop feeding the problem. Now, this is the bit almost everyone skips. Before you try to redirect your dog away from another dog, you need to teach the redirect when there are no triggers around. You do not teach the dog to disengage from another dog by waiting until they are staring at another dog and then shouting, "Leave it." That is backwards. You need to build the behavior first and then you add difficulty later. The main behavior you should expect from your dog is simple. When you say something like, "Let's go," the dog needs to turn away from whatever they are doing, come with you, give you attention and move with you. And it does not have to be like a formal heel or a sit or a down. Definitely not freezing in one spot. Just turn with me, move with me and focus on me. And movement is super important for reactive dogs. Because asking a reactive dog to stare at a trigger and stay still is very difficult. Movement gives the dog something to do. So the first thing you must do is start in a boring environment. No dogs, no triggers and no pressure. Make sure you have some food or their favorite toy. What you need to do is then say, "Let's go." You turn around, the dog follows you and you reward. Then you keep moving and reward again and again and again. And then you can suddenly stop, and if the dog stays focused on you, you mark and reward again. You're teaching the dog that your cue means turn, move, stay connected with me, and good things will happen. And you need to practice this again and again and again. Because later, when your dog sees a trigger, you don't want them thinking, "What does let's go mean?" You want the response to be automatic, almost habitual. The same way the reactivity has become habitual, the alternative behavior needs mass behind it too. You need more repetitions of the right behavior than the wrong one. That's where the work is. Not at the park where your dog is already screaming. The best place to teach engagement with you is at your home, in the garden, on the driveway, in quiet car parks, and in boring places. That's where the foundation gets built. And if you're watching this thinking, "This is exactly what my dog does, but I don't know how to put the steps together," that is what I help owners with. I run a structured 6-week reactivity and behavior program where we can work on the dog's obedience, state of mind, leash work, communication, confidence, and controlled exposure around triggers. So if you're sick of stressful walks, scanning the horizon, avoiding every dog, and feeling embarrassed every time your dog kicks off, there's a link in the description for you to book a call. We'll have a chat, see what's going on with your dog, and see if the program is the right fit. Now back to the process. Now let's talk about tools, because this is where people make a massive mistake. They buy a prong collar, they buy a slip lead, they buy a knee collar, they put it on the dog, and then they walk straight into the trigger and start correcting the dog. And then they wonder why the dog gets worse. The problem is not always the tool. The problem is the dog has no idea what the pressure means. If your dog is staring at another dog, feeling stressed, and suddenly they get popped on the lead, They may not think, oh, that came from my handler because I ignored a known command. What they may think is, that dog caused that discomfort, and now the other dog is even more of a problem. This is called a bad association. This is how people accidentally make reactivity worse. So before you use leash pressure around triggers, the dog needs to understand the leash pressure away from triggers. They need to understand how to yield to the leash. They need to understand that pressure is information and not random punishment. So you must teach this separately. The way to do this is apply light leash pressure. When the dog follows you, that pressure goes away and you're back to a loose lead, and then you reward. This way you teach the dog how to move with the leash instead of fighting against it. Then you layer the leash pressure over your verbal cue. So the sequence might be light leash tap, then you say let's go, the dog turns, you release the pressure on the leash and you reward. Over time the dog feels the leash cue, turns before you even need to say the verbal cue. Now the leash has meaning, now it helps the dog. But if you skip that step and only use the tool when the dog is already triggered, you're asking for a problem. Once your dog understands the redirect in easy environments, you still don't go straight to dogs. The next step is non-trigger distractions. That means something your dog finds interesting but not something that makes them react. And that could be a person they like, it may be food on the floor, maybe a toy, maybe something moving around, maybe a low level distraction that catches their attention. So once you set up your non-trigger distraction, the sequence needs to look something like this. The dog looks at the distraction, you say let's go, they turn away and move towards you and you reward. If they don't turn, use your leash guidance. So apply pressure on the lead. When they turn towards you, turn that pressure off and you reward. Now you're teaching the dog you can be interested in something and still turn away from it. This matters because reactive dogs often don't just need obedience. They need the skill of disengagement. They need to learn that looking at something does not mean obsessing over it. They need to learn that attention can come back to you. And you don't teach that for the first time in front of things that send them over the edge. You must build it in layers. Now we finally start working around the actual trigger, but not randomly. Not by walking down the street and hoping for the best. You want controlled setups. If your dog reacts to dogs, you might want to use a calm and neutral dog at a distance. Not an off-lead dog charging around, not a dog barking back, not a dog dragging its owner towards you. A controlled dog, a sensible handler, with space, distance and a plan. Distance at this point in the training is your friend. You start far enough away that your dog can notice the trigger but still think. That distance will be different for every dog. For one dog it might be 100 feet. For another dog it might be across a field. For another dog it might be the other side of a car park. The point is not how close you can get, the point is whether your dog can stay under the threshold. So when the dog sees the trigger, before they explode, you need to redirect. Give your cue, such as let's go. Turn away from the trigger, and if the dog moves with you, you reward them. And then reward again and again to keep them engaged with you. Then you loop around, let them notice the trigger again, redirect and reward again. And over time, something important starts to happen. The dog sees the trigger and starts looking back at you before you even ask. That is a huge moment. Because now the dog is learning dogs in the environment don't mean explode. They mean check in with my owner, stay calm and move with my handler. That is the beginning of neutrality. So you are not forcing socialization. You are not making your dog say hello. And most importantly, you are not flooding them. Neutrality is the key. The dog can see the world without feeling the need to control it. Now let's be honest. At some point your dog will probably react. You'll misjudge the distance. A dog will come around a corner that you won't see. Another owner will let their dog get too close. Your timing will be off. You or your dog might be having a bad day. It happens, and sometimes life will get in the way. We are all human. But how you handle that moment matters. First, you do not panic. You do not scream and shout at your dog. You do not start flapping. You do not get emotional or take it personally. You do not start yanking the leash like a maniac. You just stay calm. You mark the behaviour as wrong. That might be a firm no or ah, or whatever correction marker your dog has been taught. But the key is the dog needs to understand that the consequence is coming from you because of their behaviour. not from the other dog, not from the environment, and not randomly. So what you might want to do is apply the minimum physical correction, such as a pop on the lead that is needed to interrupt the behaviour and get them back into the alternative behaviour. That is super important. You are not trying to punish reactivity out of the dog forever in one massive correction. That is where people create fallout. The goal is not react once and I'll light you up so badly you'll never dare to do it again. The goal is, no, that behaviour is not acceptable, come back to the behaviour I have taught you. So the sequence, if your dog is already reacting, is this. Apply your correction marker. By this I mean use your leash to deliver a physical correction to the dog. Then redirect your dog towards you, move away from the trigger and reward when your dog comes back to you. Then stay in the area if you safely can. Let the dog calm down, then leave when the dog is in a better state. Do not just run away the second the dog reacts, because if the dog reacts and you immediately drag them away, the dog may learn, I react, then we escape, and the scary thing goes away. For some dogs, that reinforces that behavior. So if it is safe, you want to regain control, get the dog thinking again, reward the alternative behavior, and then move away calmly. And again, the correction should be firm enough to interrupt and redirect the dog away from the trigger, but not so firm that you make the dog terrified on the environment. This is the balance people miss and struggle with. You must reward the right behavior and correct the wrong behavior properly and clearly. Build the foundation first so the dog understands both sides of the conversation. Once the dog is doing well in controlled setups, then you can start working around uncontrolled triggers. But even then, you don't jump straight into the hardest environment. You choose smart locations, places with space, places with exit routes, places where you might see dogs where you're not trapped. Definitely not narrow pavements, not tiny alleyways, not busy park entrances, not places where dogs are going to appear in your dog's face with no warning. You need to stack the odds in your favour. In the early stages, you must redirect early. Your dog sees the other dog, you redirect, reward, move and keep things successful. Then, as your dog improves, you allow them to look a little longer. What will help you foresee if the dog will react is by reading their body language. Are they soft? Is the mouth open? Are they able to disengage? Can they breathe? Can they move? Can they take food? Can they look and then look away? Or are they freezing, stiffening, closing their mouth, leaning forward, getting tall, locking in on the trigger and ignoring you? Because the goal is not to constantly micromanage the dog forever. The goal is to teach the dog how to process the environment calmly. At first, you help a lot, then you help less. Then eventually, in the right situations, the dog can look at a trigger and choose calmness on their own. That is what we're aiming for. Now, there's another massive piece to this, and that is fulfillment. A lot of reactive dogs are underfulfilled, especially working breeds and high drive dogs. And I need to say this clearly. Walking around the block is not enough for a lot of dogs. It might move their legs, but it doesn't necessarily satisfy their brain. Some dogs need play, such as tug, retrieve, obedience, scent work, structured training, impulse control, problem solving, and a job to do. Because if your dog has drive and no outlet, they will find an outlet on their own. And sometimes that outlet becomes reactivity. That dog starts using the walk as the event of the day. Being reactive is the only adrenaline, the only excitement, and the only job they have. So they start scanning for something to react to. That's why structured play is so powerful. Tug, for example, is not just about tiring the dog out. It teaches arousal and control. Bite the toy, let go of the toy, bring it back, listen while excited, engage with me as your handler, and follow my rules when you're aroused. And this really matters, because a dog that can listen when aroused in play has a better chance of listening when aroused in the real world. This is why behaviour work is not just stop barking at dogs, it's the whole lifestyle. Structure, fulfillment, communication, rules, outlets, clear consequences, confidence, neutrality, all of it matters. Now here's the bit some people don't like. Can reactive dogs be fixed? The honest answer is some can and some can't. Some dogs can get to the point where they are calm, neutral, reliable, and the owner doesn't need to constantly manage every second. Other dogs can improve massively, but they'll always need sensible handling. And that's not failure, that's reality of owning a dog. If a dog has been rehearsing reactivity for years, if they get a huge internal reward from reacting, if they have genetic issues, if they have a very low threshold, and if they have a long history of conflict, then yes, these types of dogs can still improve, but that doesn't mean you should pretend they are a golden retriever at a dog cafe. You need to know your dog. You need to know what they can handle. You need to know where the line is. Maybe your dog can walk past dogs across the street calmly, and that is brilliant. But maybe they still shouldn't meet random dogs nose to nose or play with other dogs. Maybe your dog can go to quiet parks, and that is brilliant, but maybe busy off-lead dog areas are still a bad idea. The goal is not to turn every reactive dog into a social butterfly. The goal is to give the dog and the owner a better life. Calmer walks, more control, less stress, more freedom, and more confidence. That is a win. So if your dog is reactive, stop trying to fix the problem at the explosion point. That is too late. Diagnose the trigger first. Understand what reinforces the behaviour. Stop the rehearsal of bad behaviour. Teach the redirect. Teach the tools you are going to use properly. Firstly, add non-trigger distractions, then add controlled trigger distractions, then uncontrolled triggers. And give your dog proper fulfillment outside of the walk. That is how you build neutrality. Not by hoping it, not by winging it, and not by waiting until your dog is already losing its mind, but by following the process. And if you want help doing this with your dog, I run a 6-week reactivity and behaviour transformation program for owners who are sick of stressful walks and want a clear plan. If that sounds like you, click the link in the description and book a call. We'll talk through what's going on, what you've tried, what your dog is struggling with, and whether I can help. Because your dog's behaviour isn't random. It's a result of what they are doing every single day. Will you change it or keep living with it? I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. Take care.